Welcome to Let's Calculate Something. Today we're going to do a little bit of calculus. We're going to focus on differentiation. We're going to learn a little bit about the quotient rule, which says when you have a function in y made up of the division of two functions, then the derivative of y will be the derivative of the numerator times the denominator minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator, and then you're going to divide that by the denominator squared. So what we're going to do is we're going to work this through three examples. First example is pretty straightforward, just to introduce the topic. The second example is a little more complicated with the inverse tangent function. And then the third example is going to be a lot more complicated because we have a regular function here, a trigonometric function on the numerator, but then we have the product of two functions on the denominator. So if you want to see a little bit about the product rule, which we're going to need to use nested inside of the quotient rule, you can go look at the video that's here. On that video we explain the product rule in detail. So what we'll do is I'll erase this and get set up for the first problem, and we'll work that. Okay, so for our first exercise or example, we have x cubed divided by cosine x. We have to find the derivative of it. So we've got f of x defined as x cubed, and g of x is defined as cosine x. So now let's take the derivative of each part. So f prime of x cubed is simply 3x squared. And the derivative of g of x equals minus sine of x. Okay, so now that we have all the parts, now we have to plug them into our equation for the quotient rule. And so what we have is f prime of x times g of x, so that'll be 3x squared times g of x, which is cosine x. Sorry. Cosine x. Now minus. In the product rule we had a plus there, but in the quotient rule we have to do a minus on this part of it. So we have minus f of x, which is x cubed, times the derivative of g of x, which is minus sine of x. Alright, then we have to divide that all by g of x squared, which is cosine, so that's cosine x squared. Okay, so now we've got everything we need. Now we just have to do a little bit of simplification. We can get rid of this minus sign, and we can also factor out an x squared. So let's do that to get our final answer. So we have x squared times 3x, times 3 cosine x plus, because these minus signs cancel, x times sine x all over cosine x squared. And that's our answer. Now, this would be a really good time for you to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and then also set the notifications. We're going to be putting out tons of videos on different topics with math, and so if you want to get to see some more of our work, then please subscribe, and you'll see all that we're doing. We're going to cover calculus, we're going to cover geometry, trigonometry, algebra, the whole gambit. We're going to do practical problems too. These tools lead us up to being able to have the tools to solve some practical problems. So let's go on to the next example. So the second example we have is a little bit of a polynomial, a little more complicated than the last one, and the inverse tan function. So f of x in this case is going to be 3x cubed plus 3, and then g of x is going to be the inverse tan function. Now, something to note is that the derivative of the inverse tan function is 1 over 1 plus x squared. So we're going to need that in a minute. So let's take the derivative of f of x and g of x, and then we'll be able to solve this problem. So derivative of f of x is going to equal 9x squared And then the derivative of g of x, as we just said over here, is going to equal 1 over 1 plus x squared. Okay, so now we have f of x, f prime of x, g prime of x. We can plug in, simplify, and solve. So y prime is going to equal f prime of x, which is 9x squared, times g of x, which is inverse tan of x, minus, always remember the minus, we have to take f of x times g prime of x. So that is 3x squared plus 2. Erase this now. Times g prime of x, which is 1 over 1 plus x squared. That's all divided by g of x squared, which is the inverse tangent of x squared. So we can do a little bit of simplification here. This equals, we can see that, I think we'll simplify this piece first. If you want, I'll just extract that out in a different color. Let's do that, save us some board space. So this simplifies down to 3x squared plus 2 all over 1 plus x squared. Okay? So we can rewrite this now as 9x squared times the inverse tangent of x minus 3x squared plus 2 divided by 1 plus x squared. Okay? That is all divided by inverse tangent of x squared. And that's our answer. Okay, for our third and most complicated problem for the quotient rule, we're going to have sine of x divided by x cubed times log of x. So in this case, f of x equals sine of x, and g of x equals the product of two things, x cubed and log of x. So getting the derivative of f of x is pretty easy. That's just cosine x. Getting the derivative of g of x is a little more complicated. We have to use the product rule, which was in the video that you'll see up above there if you want to go review that. But basically, it's the derivative of this function times this function plus this function times the derivative of that function. So let's work that out over here, knowing that derivative of log x equals 1 over x. Okay? So, if we take g of x, we take the derivative of it, it's going to be 3x squared times log x plus x cubed times the derivative of log x, which is 1 over x. Okay? And that simplifies. We can get rid of this x. This becomes x squared. So that equals 3. I'm sorry. I could simplify it a little more by taking the x squared out. Let's do that. So x squared times 3 log x plus 1. Okay, so let's rewrite this up here. We have x squared times 3 ln x plus 1. Okay, so now we have all the pieces we need to solve this problem. And so it's going to be a little messy, but we'll get to simplify it, okay? So f prime of x is cosine x. So we have y prime equals cosine x times g of x, which is x cubed log x, minus, you notice before we used a plus with the product rule, with the quotient rule, we use a negative, minus f of x, which is sine x, times what we discovered for, this is x squared. Yeah, what we discovered before for the derivative of g of x, we need to plug into here. So we have x squared times 3 log x plus 1. That's going to be all over the square of g of x. G of x, square of g of x, and that's this. So we have x cubed times log of x, all of that squared. So now we need to do some simplification. We can simplify this a little bit, take some shorthand here. We can simplify this because this becomes x to the 6th, and then we can get rid of this, and we can make this the square of that log. Okay, so that's the same thing, we just wrote it a different way. And now we can see we have a lot of x squareds that we can get rid of, so let's do that. Or x's that we can get rid of. So this x squared can go, and this can become an x, and this becomes a 4. Alright, so now we can rewrite it. Cosine x, x times cosine x, log x, minus sine x, times 3 log x, plus 1, all over x to the 4th log of x squared. And that is the answer. And so this one was pretty complicated because we had to introduce that we had the product rule nested inside the quotient rule, and sometimes derivatives can be pretty messy, and this is a pretty messy function here, but that is the answer. And so hope you enjoyed the video. We have lots more videos coming.